Hello everybody out there in internet land, it's Kaz again coming to you with something a bit different, as you can tell by the length of the bottom of the screen and the title and everything here. Today we're going to be talking about the entire Star Fox franchise in one shot. Let's just say that we here at the channel have backlogged quite a lot of stuff, and we've decided to tackle the game reviews like this to try and get some stuff moved along before I'm 30, so we're going to try this format instead and see if it flies. Star Fox as a series has been one of Nintendo's B-team starters for quite a long time now, since it was introduced in the mid-90s and having produced an entire 8 games to talk about. It hasn't been a juggernaut for our good old Japanese friends, and to be honest, after we've gone through everything in preparation for this video, it doesn't seem like Nintendo quite knew what to do with the series after a while. They did their natural thing and tried to expand on the core ideas and characters with the sequels, but trying to branch this thing out into a tentpole phenomenon hasn't really panned out for them, and to be even more frank, as a genre, it's not really in Nintendo's expertise to begin with, since at its core, Star Fox was this attempt by Nintendo to branch out with a quirky cast into the on-rail shooter genre with an anthropomorphic lead cast, villains, some sci-fi thrown in, tinged with some Star Wars, where the Star Fox team are tasked with saving their galaxy from whatever space baddie that Nintendo decided to drag in front of us today. Something nice and simple that could have gotten expanded on and developed into this lore-driven sci-fi universe for us to explore and fall in love with, but at the end of the series back in 2016 with Zero, all we got were 2 attempted deep dives into this galaxy that Corneria sits in, and it just packed in a bunch of no-thought shooty bang ships for the rest of the games. I know that's unfair to the original and its sequel since they're coming to us from the good old boys SNES, but considering the SNES could handle some well-known RPGs, Nintendo still could have graced us with some flavor text here and there to flesh out the world, maybe some banter. The villains are decent, but there's not much to them to glom onto as characters by design alone, even though a couple of the big names are iconic for good reason. But to get to that, let's start at the start.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
This series begins oddly enough on the SNES, which was at a point in video game history where things were starting to get weird and experimental. With the new 16-bit power of this gray box of moving parts, developers were able to get more out of the old cartridges than they did back on the Nintendo Entertainment System and started playing around with the components, which thereby gave us new genres, new gameplay techniques, and interface design among other leaps forward. Star Fox seemed to be an idea that Nintendo came around for to show off that the SNES was capable of legitimate 3D video games, which explains why the game looks like Geometry War, where triangles decide to fight squares, rectangles, and rhombuses. Thankfully, Nintendo did incorporate background art and some Mode 7 graphics throughout the title to try and mesh the new with the familiar to flesh out their sci-fi shooter arenas. Rebel fighters must go out to destroy the evil Emperor guy that may have known the protagonist's father, so they must fight their way across the galaxy that the Emperor is taking over in order to get back to his base and shoot rockets up his nose. It was an ambitious project to say the least, since 3D back before the 5th gen was difficult to implement, and while it could be a selling point, it is similarly salesworthy to stick with the old second dimension, since the SNES was able to bring some of the best pixel art to the small screen that players had ever been able to see by that point. It can benefit games of the time to go for one or the other. Today, Star Fox looks janky, and even back at the time, it probably still had that opinion, but few others were attempting something so out of the box, and therefore it could compete because in spite of the graphics looking odd, Star Fox played well with aerial dodge moves and maneuvers along with quick turning and spontaneous battlefields, which worked fantastically well due to Star Fox's low draw distance being a sacrifice for the 3D power, which ended up blending with their design idea. The game was also built around the idea that Nintendo wasn't able to put a lot of content into the game, with each run of it being only 6 levels long, and each run giving you limited continues in the classic idea where you had to battle your video games in order to complete them. I still argue that a good way to somewhat get around this would be take all 3 paths the game has for you to take and smush them all together so that you could get more playtime out of what you developed and everybody could see everything, but I guess Nintendo couldn't make the continue counter go up far enough to make that happen. Star Fox was an icon of its time and a good start towards continuing to develop the industry's eventual innovation into transferring 3D knowledge down to all genres and continuing to create new properties, types of games, and stories to tell.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
Normally, we wouldn't be talking about this game in a full review if we were doing it 5 years ago. Also, because this wouldn't fit the format of the old times, but in an odd move from Nintendo that did let this game get to the market, they included it on the SNES Classic and Nintendo's emulator service, so we can officially talk about it. If I were them, I would have left this in the vault, since it's a stupidly quick game. My run on everything it had to offer seemed to cap up in less than 40 minutes, which even for a game that's chalked to the nines like this, is pathetically terrible. I'm not sure why they wanted this on the market at all, since for the longest time it was simply a forgotten prototype, which would explain the game design in the short length. Star Fox 2 did try to push the series forward by breaking up the gameplay away from simple on-rail shooting to include 3D flying environments, these building levels that mirrored classic FPSs, along with the walking R-Wing gameplay that would get reused later on in the series' lifetime. Unfortunately, the story seems to be almost identical to the original. Andross returns as the antagonist in a barely developed story, and while the introduction of the Star Wolf team and their signature dogfighting boss battles is really nice, they don't add much to the overall story of the game, and that's pretty much this game in a nutshell. It's a bunch of innovative vignettes that don't connect together. The sequel also doesn't have the difficulty to justify limited continues, which is another reason why the game is laughably short. You can just blast through everything because it's made of butter. The sequel has some cool moments and is definitely bringing a swath of new ideas to the table. It's just that this game doesn't have enough content to justify its own existence, and it should have remained a cancelled dream of a game instead of being resurrected like the Snyder Cut. It's just not that good. At least they had a cool polygonal dragon for a couple of minutes. That was pretty awesome.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
Now, I'm sure that if you asked anybody about Star Fox, this is the title that they would immediately think of. And why wouldn't you? While the original and its sequel suffered some limitations and misfires on their ideas, 64 was where it all came together. It has the correct length, it has the better looking 3D graphics, it has the 3D battlefields with different vehicles, it has the secret and alternate paths to find, tons of bosses for most levels, and hell, they even brought back Star Wolf and Andross as bosses, along with the 3-path level system, with limited continues and quote-unquote ally permadeath throughout the runs. Star Fox 64 had the best of Star Fox and Star Fox 2 brought up to 64 specs, with the better visuals and voice acting for all the characters that were involved. It really was the game that Star Fox was crying out to be, and it was bloody fantastic. Back in the pre-internet days, having those hard-to-find additional areas with some secret bosses was tantalizing enough to keep players running Corneria and the rest of the Lilat system over and over again, trying to find those opening conditions, along with getting the LAN friends around to enjoy this game's multiplayer features as part of those early years of the console arena shooter that the N64 oddly fell very much into. Later on in the campaign, you will have access to the Landmaster tank and the Blue Marine, depending on what's required for each level, which flips over some perspective design and gives you a different sort of vehicle shooter experience, like the stuff that was attempted in Star Fox 2. I'd say the one downside is that this is Andross' third appearance, and Andross just isn't a Bowser. When you're doing sci-fi, reusing the same antagonist over and over again gets boring. It's a world of infinite possibility, so Nintendo should have tried something else, especially when all there is to him is that he wants to blow up the galaxy, and at one time he probably also blew up the protagonist's father, which isn't all that surprising considering how difficult it is to float through that final level. Beyond Starwolf, the rest of the bosses are pretty forgettable, if somewhat creative, such as a lava monster that spits rocks, and some sort of weird bone-based desert creature. At least in the original, Andross' boss battle was pretty iconic for having to fight a brain instead of the robotic face that we got in the remake. Thankfully, Nintendo did realize that Star Fox 64 was already a masterpiece, so 64 3D is mostly a port of the game to reintroduce it to Nintendo's fans later on down the line, and the graphics have been shined up as well, as some more voice acting and character profiles were added. I don't know if it'd be worth it at full price, but at least the original creators didn't screw this reintroduction up in any real substantial way. It's just a bit different and switched around. 64 was a fantastic collection of Star Fox's better ideas brought up to 64 3D specs, and the 3D remake puts a cherry on top of it by bringing the original one up to the mid-2000s specs, and the additional ease of download play multiplayer for the at-the-time buyers. It's definitely the game that defined the franchise, the thing that it was trying to be back in 1996.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
Oh boy. Wow and dang. So yeah, this one. Let's just sum this up right at the top. Something weird happened to Star Fox here. Adventure is an odd story of development, to say the least. This game was spun out from a different game that Nintendo were shoring up called Dinosaur Island that went through some creative decisions or partial cancellations, so Nintendo, who then decided to attach the Star Fox team to it in some bizarre thrust to get Dinosaur Island off the ground. This is also the introduction of Crystal, the new Star Fox member who became instantly iconic for unknown reasons. Instead of a traditional on-rail shooter that the series was known for, considering the first 3 games, the developer decided to reduce that aspect and put it into several sections of the game rather than making it play its central role. Even more annoying, the vehicle shooter sections are simply to travel between different levels like we're piloting gummy ships again. Development on this game was done by Rare back in the day, and the idea that filled up the rest of Adventure was that they made Star Fox start playing Zelda. In an alternate world, this idea might have worked if it were a translated or simplified Zelda game, but clearly Rare did not understand how the Zelda tradition was supposed to work. They have the new item grabbing, puzzles, dungeons, collectibles, and overworld figured out. They have all the parts, but something got really lost when they started trying to connect everything together. It's a lengthy, beefy game with a bunch of levels and stuff to do. You know, your pre-dungeon puzzles, your connecting dungeon puzzles, your overworld trekking. They have the 4 unique dungeons, but the problem is that the minute-to-minute objectives are weak, bland, or just confused as to what they're trying to do because they're not explained very well. The game is defined by repetitive combat against useless enemies, puzzles such as block pushing, button shooting, platforming, and other bottom tier level dungeon ideas that lack the sort of intuitive design that gives you things such as shortcuts and roundabout paths that eliminate backtracking, which have been done well in Zelda's dungeons or God of War levels, along with the huge Phantom Hourglass-esque problem of needing to redo a central dungeon in order to slot in your MacGuffins to progress the story after dungeon completion, instead of the much more sane version of keeping all 4 of the de jure devices in your pants until the final act when you actually need them. Clearly, Rare was being handed a muddled mess of a project that they didn't quite know of what to do with, even with their previous experience on the Banjos and Conquer possibly having something to do with the shakeup of veteran developers during their 2000s years. The whole thing is a bizarre and creative mishmash of ideas, levels, objectives, characters, and bosses that conflicts with each other, doesn't add up to a cohesive whole, and left me frustrated and annoyed a great many times with the shallow facsimile of a game that would later have one of their most highlighted entries on the same console, Twilight Princess. However, this game was mishandled behind the scenes that led to Rare having to deal with the Star Fox cast in a situation which they did not fit in one bit, trying to manhandle a gameplay model that the developers didn't have the experience to put together, or whatever unfortunates actually befell Dinosaur Island. Maybe that partial cancellation should have led to an all-out start over of this project. When you sit down and realize that Rare recast all the voice actors for the Star Fox team and the contractual appearance of Andross was saved only for the final moments of the game in a misguided attempt to consolidate the antagonists together and raise the stakes, maybe Rare should have started heading for the damn door and get this shit off of its drawing table.
That should be it, Rob. Go it.
Affirmative. I'll get back to work.
Hey, Fox! Isn't this music getting on your nerves? I'm trying to work on my maps.
Okay, old-timer. Turn it down, Slippy.
Some other highlights of Adventure include that the central idea is that Fox would use the Crystal Staff from Crystal's ancient civilization as his prime weapon, which would unlock abilities such as earthquake shots and shooting elemental powers. The antagonists are anthro dinosaurs that just have to break everything on Dinosaur Planet, which is apparently the planet's actual name, and the big boss is named Scales. If anything was memorable about him, then maybe his voice actor did a good job, because if anything else, Rare can cast well from their British talent pool.
Yeah! You may have returned the Spellstones, but the war is not over yet.
There's Tricky, a Triceratops and Prince of Dinosaur Land, and is just
Frozen by now.
Why, you little...
Hey, I wouldn't if I were you. My dad's a king Earthwalker, and he'll bash you up.
well, he's Fox's sidekick for the whole game, and he's
Come on, Fox. We'll make a great team.
Tricky.
But I need to help my mom.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people like Tricky.
She sounds like she's in big trouble, Fox.
Plus, this constant backtracking in an overworld that's completely not built for it, since there's very little exploration possible, or additional quests or collectibles to even bother with. The script is also pretty terrible, since there's no substance to the story, the banter isn't good enough to fill the time, and this game is also full of that cringy as balls, hey youth, snappy dialogue that falls on its fucking face harder than an asteroid.
It's always the same with you, Fox. Shoot first, ask questions later. This mission is about saving the planet, not blowing it up. It requires a different tactic. Try using your head.
And finally, there's the fact that Star Fox is only here for the flimsy Cowboy Bebop reason of, hey, we're broke, we'll do any job that pays bounty hunter thing. There are many things wrong with this game that it's amazing to me that the ISO didn't fucking explode on contact with Dolphin. Let's just move on.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
For those of you not in the know, Star Fox did get some limelight back in the early 2000s. They didn't get just one baffling refresh and adventure, they also got Assault only several years later. Which also makes it very confusing to talk about this part of the time of the franchise, since they're identical and forgettable names. It's not like this game was, I don't know, an alien mind control story that could have been called Zadical or something, maybe Wensam's Razor, something to goddamn stand out against Adventure. Well, in spite of the name, Assault is objectively the best game in the franchise, where Nintendo finally took the lessons learned from putting everything together in 64 and did something to flesh out the characters, the galaxy, and Team Star Fox in general. It gives us not only a great vehicle shooter, but a legitimate story to go along with it. After an introductory level where Star Fox starts chasing down an Andross plot and defeats his useless nephew or whoever, he's a joke character anyway, just for the beginning of the game, we get introduced to these hexagonal alien bugs who are the game's answers to the Borg. It's honestly just the Insect Borg, that's what it is. Yeah, the Swarm antagonist isn't interesting, but in Assault they make it work since they use the Insect Borg to do interesting things, rather than having the Insect Borg itself be the antagonist. Stuff does happen throughout this game, and we even get some character arcs, such as Peppy having been promoted out of Star Fox and now works as a commander in the military. Falco is still a half-cocked hothead who will try to talk down or inspire the team to do their best at whatever time he believes is correct. Slippy gets to take a more active role as a technical officer, and Crystal is allowed to exist as a helpful team member. Fox gets to take more of a protagonist role as he deals with the antagonist personally, the developing Aperoid situation, and when Starwolf comes to dick around along with the thing about his flying ace father by the end of the game. Also, something happens with General Pepper around Act 3 of the story that we'll get to, but moreover, he gets to take a more active, commanding role and is involved in decision-making around the Aperoid mission, gathering the intel to stall the Aperoid invasion. Shortly afterwards, we get to meet up with a lesser character who filled a more major role in Assault. Pigma from the old Starwolf team has disbanded to become a crooked salvager, and he comes across one of the Aperoid cores from one of the destroyed aliens. He decides to nick it to sell it for big bucks. Unfortunately for him, Star Fox soon gets a report about Pigma as they were trying to track down that core, and they find Pigma, and he had a bad time with that little device. Having been integrated into the Aperoids, Pigma has now become a part of his own ship and has to be destroyed due to being too far gone. I mean, Pigma isn't a good person, so I won't be crying over his death. But yeah, Star Fox actually kill him, and that sets a goddamn tone. It's not an edgy story, but it does get tinged a bit by darker themes, which makes it an interesting story. Later missions help solidify the threat that the Swarm poses when they start invading whole planets and taking colonies, with very little that the locals can do about it, and Star Fox only winning by the skins of their teeth, with some clever tactics. It's like the game takes the time to properly set up the threat of the villain. What a weird idea for a goddamn story, Nintendo. As the looming disaster takes more effect, some other twists start occurring, so spoilers I guess for the next minute or so of the video. First of all, Starwolf decides to defect to the non-Aperoid side temporarily for the obvious reason. Wolf isn't a fucking idiot and can think straight, and somewhat honorably by serving alongside Fox, just to defeat his rival later, even saving his bacon at one time during an important mission. Then there's the attack on Corneria, just to really tighten the screws, where the city itself was no match for the Swarm after their artillery broke down. Again, they barely forced the Aperoids back from their landing parties, and having to sacrifice quite a bit to make that happen at all. General Pepper is one of the first casualties in this battle, and at the end of the mission it only went over so well because Peppy managed to right the Great Fox after it started getting integrated into the Swarm, and he self-sacrificed himself to use the Great Fox to blow open the portal to the Aperoid Queen and win the day for the rest of the team to make it. So yeah, that's some powerful stuff for a series that only barely ever attempted to flesh out their characters. And it just keeps going since the final mission is going into enemy territory to destroy the Queen at the center with their super weapon, which will somehow destroy all the Aperoids in the galaxy as long as they lodge it into the Queen. Because of the immense power of intergalactic potatoes. The Queen doesn't take this lying down as she tries to knock Fox off balance using the voices of the previously downed characters such as Pigma, Pepper, and even a cameo of Fox's dad telling him to give up. Which is a cool scene right before a lame final battle with the Queen where you chase her down in a 3D shoot 'em up and just avoid her volleys to her death. Yeah, the antagonist is a cool idea with the Aperoids, but when it came down to the end, the actual fight isn't much to write home about other than being a bit overly difficult with repeating the cutscene and no checkpoints throughout the parts of the battle. Assault is a brilliant story that finally gives us this deep look into the Lilat system and uses the alternative gameplay ideas of the previous entries in the series to blend together into the defining game of the series for me. This is what happens, Nintendo, when you give up, stop doing Andross over and over again, and give us an actual other antagonist that's super goddamn cool because this is sci-fi and that's what you do. All of this definitely makes up for the confusion of what the hell Adventure was trying to do.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
If you don't know what this game is, I don't blame you. I'm pretty sure this one fell under the DS shovelware avalanche, which is a real shame since it's one of my favorites. Yeah, looking at this, I'd be baffled too. What could make Command stand out in a crowd? Well, it's not in the gameplay, so what do you think? Yep, it has a kick-ass story. The game is set up a bit odd, but I guess for Star Fox it's a bit of a tradition at this point. You can take alternate paths to defeat the evil bad emperor at the edge of the galaxy, and you'll take around 6 levels to get to the end. But the difference is that the branches aren't found in the game, they're found in the story decision. Command is set a substantial amount of time later in the characters' lives, and believe it or not, Star Fox has broken up and moved off to other jobs similar to what happened in Assault. Falco's moved off to his own rebel fighter group, Slippy is now working in science, Crystal broke off a relationship to Fox, and Peppy is still a military king. The story branches also lead to alternate stories, instead of just being different directions to the same antagonist. In some stories, we'll focus on Falco rejoining Fox's group, Crystal getting back together with Fox and having a kid, defeating Pigma, who's reprised his role as a Borg cube, Crystal rejoining Star Wolf or becoming a pariah, Andross's kid reforming Venom into a nice place to live, and a couple others I'm sure I'm forgetting. It's a ridiculous what-if game filled with ideas and around 10 compelling endings to the tales of not only the characters we know, but new characters, since these timelines extend decades into the future of the franchise. It's a brilliant idea, fantastic one, because after this, you can take any of these timelines and run with them, since this is uncharted territory for the series. We've got completely new, brand new characters doing things. It's a shame that the gameplay sucks ass. Hello everybody out there, it's Post-Review Kaz here. I returned because it turned out that there were some important admissions in the script for Command that need to be rectified here. I misremembered the gameplay of Command, and it's a bit more complicated than what I thought it was going to be, because the central idea of Command is that while it does retain the claustrophobic and repetitive shooting combat that we had mentioned and shown in other parts of the video, the other half of the deal is that this game is also a turn-based strategy sort of thing. When you get to a new area, you're struck with a strategy screen. Frequently on this screen, you will also see that most of the enemy field is covered in fog of war. The fog of war can either be circumvented by directly scribbling on it while you're going through it, or you can fly straight through it and hopefully find a target once you're going through it. Once you get onto a field, your mission is very simple. You're supposed to defeat certain targets or all the targets on the field. There are certain things that enemies can do while they're on the screen, as well as your own ships. Depending on where you are in the story, you'll get access to a certain amount of ships, and you'll also get a central command ship that you'll have to protect as the strategy objective that you're going for. Most of the time, defending the ship is rather easy, to be honest, since you will have access to many ships that can cover the entire screen relatively quickly against the enemies that you're fighting. You can cover a lot of distance, and honestly, on some of these maps, a lot of the areas will be covered in areas that you can't actually do anything with, and if they're covering so much of the screen, then you won't really have much of a problem, in spite of a lot of the later maps having tons of fog of war that you'll have to deal with. Again, not much of a problem if you have access to 3 to 5 ships. Now, this strategy stuff, as a base part of the game, can be pretty reactive and pretty interesting. A couple of the missions will have the command ship be under direct fire, and you'll be on the other side of the map or far away enough that you won't be able to do anything about it, which is why the command ship has an ability of itself where it can fire 1 or 2 missiles during the mission in order to defend itself from a close attacker. it can eliminate it altogether, no muss, no fuss, which is a really useful ability when you're caught straight up, or you need to fall back on that while you're working on a completely different strategy, or you just fucked up and you need a last minute reprieve in order to not completely fail the mission, because if the command ship is defeated, then you're just done. You're done right there. And while I'm making this sound a little bit more complicated than it really is, because honestly a lot of it is simple and you get enough resources to deal with everything effectively, and honestly the AI in this game isn't that impressive, so you can really work circles around it if you keep everything on top of itself, which again, because you can simultaneously delete the Fog of War, explore through it relatively quickly, it's not really a problem. You do get several types of enemies throughout the strategy as well. An important distinction is the mob squadron versus the missiles that will sometimes be fired from bases or enemy command ships. Now, these missiles will result in a completely different mission, where instead of running around a field in order to fire and kill specific ships, you'll have to run through a specific QTE flying section in order to keep with the missile and keep with it all together. Otherwise, the missile will keep going, and it will get closer to blowing the hell out of the ship at the command site, since all missiles should be aimed at the command ship. Other than that, the gameplay is pretty simplistic. All you really need to do is draw on the map paths that you want your guys to go down in order to explore, in order to attack specific targets throughout these missions. You'll also find fuel on the screen as well, possibly some additional missiles for your command ship that you can grab, and these will be important for you to get as well, because you need to have those extensions of your ability to move forward in order to get to specific targets. They're very built in to the gameplay answer for those particular missions when they come into play. And honestly, that's kind of it. I guess baseline borderline strategy game that they put into this one is not really much to write home about, and combined with the already flimsy piloting gameplay, it doesn't make for a palatable meal for the gameplay table. I wish they would have done a little bit more with it, but this is kind of what we got, so this is what we have to talk about. It gets a bit more interesting late game, or when you deal with boss missions, where they can flex a little bit on the mechanics, they can differ things up a little bit more than the usual, or maybe you'll just come into an area with 5 ships and the entire screen is Fog of War. You just really don't know, considering that they do put in a ton of different mission types, mission varieties. They don't really repeat things over time, and even when you're going to the same planet in a different story, they will differentiate the enemies that you're fighting and the map that you'll be fighting on. The piloting controls stink, being too slow and too clunky to do any of the slick combat flying of previous entries. The battlefields are too tight and constricted to do much with, since a lot of their 3D environments that you just fly around in, and not a lot of the on-rails that make for a pretty good plane flying game. Plus, the objectives and the missions are all pretty terrible with these tight environments. You can't do much with them, so they have you do some lame target shooting, or you just have enemy waves to deal with. It's all pretty fucking dull and just completely predictable nonsense we've seen before. Even the bosses are lackluster across the board, since they're long battles having too much health and not enough attack patterns to justify the amount of fluff they create, along with having to chase them down in this shopping cart of an attack vehicle. Plus, Q Games, the developer, came up with this idea to add to the gameplay when they knew that the players would be going through the same levels multiple times to hit all the ending. So what happens is that the early levels will begin leveling up over time as you hit more and more endings. So the introductory stages will start becoming more difficult as a difficulty curve throughout the game. It's a noble idea to keep up some sort of progression, but it's also annoying and unnecessary. There's no logical reason that repeat levels should be getting harder to complete as you progress through the game, when that's not really how time works. I guess it could be called some sort of New Game Plus idea, but it doesn't work canonically, and you also shouldn't do that in general. What's supposed to be the first area of the game isn't supposed to be now moderately difficult compared to the middle of the timeline. It's not like you're leveling up your combat abilities throughout the game too, so I question again as to why this was a good idea other than the developer thought otherwise the game would become stale, which I will hand a follow-up question to if that's the idea. Why did you design a game to be played a dozen times in order to get 100% of the content? Is not worth talking about. The gameplay is shallow, repetitive, and does nothing other than consistently annoy all the players like me who are desperate to get to the what-if scenarios. They do sometimes have some unique bosses to deal with, sometimes. So considering that Q Games provided Nintendo with plenty of places to go after Command, which one did the series choose for the finale?
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
Oh yeah, they picked none of those options. Zero is an embarrassing retread of Star Fox 64. I'm not going to mix words on this one. Zero is a trash game, a badly designed mess, and one that has no place even on the Wii U as a legit disc printed title. What hurts even worse is that this is the first anything release other than like Star Fox 64 3D, which is pretty ironic, in over a decade. And all we got was this? We all know that Nintendo likes to indulge its own nostalgia, and most of the times it's tolerable at worst because it's a reference here or a copied level there. It's not excusable when you make a nostalgia game. People expected by this point that the series would evolve into something grand or become a new vision, since you had 10 years to think about it. You know, since the Wii U was your 8th gen console, Nintendo, going back to the well and picking through ideas from the N64 is not okay, especially when they're this mangled after doing the redesign. Star Fox Zero is a perfect example as to what happens when you indulge your hardware gimmicks, Nintendo. When they become a main feature, it sucks balls. The only time that I can think of that you got away with this is Mario Party 8, and that's because Mario Party is a game made of hardware gimmicks, so it fits the formula. Not here it don't. Having to deal with the touchscreen controller to do simple combat commands or controller inputs is absolutely ridiculous, since a little game testing should have let you know that the natural instinct would be for people to flip their heads up and down dealing with dual screens. Almost nobody is going to hold up the touchscreen in front of the TV because players are going to want to have access to either screen at a moment's notice. And also, that this is a damned video game, Nintendo. Do you think people would hold up a clunky controller up to their face for multiple minutes during their vehicle missions? What planet do you live on? While Zero does mix up some of the mission's variety, allowing for instant change from plane to tank to walking plane to progress missions or hunt down secondary objectives, and we do get new characters and locations to shoot things in, along with fully realized 3D design that allows for some light open world elements, none of that additions justifies that this is a Star Fox 64 rehash. The story is of paramount importance to differentiated video games, so bringing it back to Andros was a laughable idea after Adventure, Assault, and Command began throwing that guy in the trash and moving on to new frontiers. Unfortunately, Nintendo just had to throw member berries at us and hope that we'd eat all of them like dutiful fans, but instead, the pushback on this was harsh and legit at the time. After having 10 years to think about it, after Command gave Nintendo a roadmap to success, they decided to serve up a quote-unquote soft reboot, only serving to show their asses to the fans and reinforce that Nintendo doesn't know what it's doing with this property, to the point that they had zero ideas for this series intro when they came to drawing this game up. It serves no new ideas, its innovations are Wii U exclusive junk, and the game is also embarrassingly short, trying to retread the same 3-path to Andros world map that only takes several hours to do a run, and thinking that shit would fly in 2016. Star Fox Zero is a shameful end for the series, and there's only one thing left on the cards that could possibly turn the series around at the time of writing.
Team Star Fox, ready for duty.
Well, that was a bust. I just played through this game yesterday, It took me all of 4 hours to get the main campaign done. And there's no reason to play the side missions because all that provides is leveling up your battle score, which is comical in a game this short and unnecessary. They even tout this goddamn idea of having some sort of online feature where you can set up these drone teams to go fight other players or their drone teams, and you can increase your score that way. What will you do with those points? Have a big number under your name! The only thing that nets you any tangible rewards are the ranks that you get from doing missions, which that can net you some bizarrely useless power-ups to your cameras. Oh, it would probably help if I told you what Guard actually is. Star Fox Guard, which has the name Star Fox attached to it, is a tower defense game. You know, the series that's about exploring and going to different planets? Well, now we're just going to one place and defending it. Here, you will help Slippy's uncle defend his mining plans from unknown robot invaders. Yeah, I don't know what Nintendo was smoking when they floated this idea, but here it is for all to see. Frankly, I didn't even bother playing this game at the time, since I thought it was a bundle for Zero's Infinite Health mode, because no single living person talked about this game like it was its own thing. Hell, after having played it, I'm starting to believe that Nintendo produced this game and slapped it onto a disc as a half-cocked apology for the mess that they knew Zero was going to be. Maybe while they're pissed off about our major new addition to a series forgotten for a flip-flopping decade, they can enjoy this game and not hate us as much. Fat lot of good that did due to the aforementioned failure of noticing its existence even though it was on the fucking box art. Anyway, the cool thing that this game actually did with the screen controller was that you can control your turrets through it, and you have access to all 12 displays at the same time on the TV. You also get a mini-map telling you where the enemies are as long as they're not invisible, which is a bullshit idea. Anybody can win easy if the other side can't see your fucking troops. But anyway, throughout the game you'll occasionally unlock various turret upgrades, but the problem is that for half of the game, you only get to upgrade one of your turrets among the dozen, and in the back half, you get 2. You know, like how in Bloons Defense, the most popular Flash entry of the genre, where you get automatic and devastating upgrades as the game progressed? Here, you get to have one of your cameras be slightly better at shooting, and the upgrades themselves are pathetic. Here's a camera that can shoot multiple targets. Here's one that can temporarily slow down anything it shoots. Here's one that can freeze enemies in place for a time and requires you to use a different turret to get the final kill, because that's fucking useful in quick shot moments. It's not until the final few missions where you'll get access to the charge shot turret that can do something remotely useful. The ties to Star Fox are also non-existent with a typical low-budget game that only has an intro and an outro cutscene, which Fox makes a couple of contractual appearances in for no legitimate reason. He'll say hi and then leave Slippy behind to be your go-between, where he'll make some casual mentions about how the robots appearing from nowhere are weird and how his uncle isn't as good at business as he thinks he is. You know, the usual personality-less banter you see in bad games, and of course, it's all without voice acting because low-tier Nintendo game. The antagonist is also absolutely terrible. For most of Guard, you have no idea who's behind, so all you end up fighting is 100 copies of the same robot, and for their credit, Nintendo at least has somewhat of an interesting mix-up of robots. They split them into Combat and Chaos models, where Combat can actually kill the tower, while Chaos are just robots fucking around with the base, blocking your turrets, stealing them, knocking them over, or just standing in front of them like the worst 7-year-old. The robots have some abilities such as being walking tanks, being really fast, or again, the one that's fucking invisible. It's a good mix of things that can be thrown together to create somewhat unique challenges, not unique enough to break from the formula of the central thing and the one thing that this game can do, but one that can occasionally get you closer to the edge of your seat, like a whole 2 inches closer at least. So, after defending 4 different levels is when the real antagonist is revealed, and the Super Brains making this game settled on the only person who could be perfect for that role, Pigma. The one guy they could think of was Blubbering Pigma, because that's the one that everybody knows. Also, his company in this game is called Astromine, if you want to know what level this game is on, development-wise. And you guessed it, he wants to destroy Grippy's minds because he hates him. He hates his company like a lot, and he also hates losing, and wants to steal his riches because one-note plots are fantastic. Seriously, this plot is the most desperate grasping for straws that I could ever think of. And I want to reiterate, this is not just an eShop downloadable. Nintendo thought it necessary to smush this thing onto discs and tie them directly to Star Fox Zero, hoping that'll make this game somehow fly. There is no legitimate or cosmic reason why this game is a disc release. This thing is so amazingly threadbare of a title that it'll only be allowable on the eShop. Putting this thing onto the Wii U disc is a joke, only more so that Guard is amazingly the better of the two games in the box. Guard is a moronic and brain-dead waste of time, and if this was a heartfelt attempt to branch out into another genre for the series, then it fails harder than Mario vs. Donkey Kong, simply because Nintendo put zero effort into this. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing was developed with a total budget of $100,000. It's a big fluff of nothing that only serves to highlight how bad Star Fox has had things since the 2000s. Skip this game at all costs if you see it. It may only be 4 hours long to do, but it's 4 hours too long. I don't think it's going to be a major surprise to anyone that currently Star Fox is not in a good place. Nintendo did at least put out Star Fox 64 again somewhat recently, so people will know that at one point that the series had potential. But unfortunately, a re-release does not reignite the fan base and build the series. New games do that. And the only real recent releases were a pair of absolute misfires from a company that doesn't seem to care about this property. Not understanding what made it good, or that it's not going to fit into the tower defense world without some heavy rewrites, which Nintendo don't seem willing to do. When Star Fox has been good, we had a hard look at a riveting sci-fi world that could have some of the most beloved characters in the company history if they took some time to give them real arcs, motivations, and backstories. You know, give them a well-rounded character, maybe a good Count Bleck type villain with a plot and believer henchman. We could have some of these things and a solid as hell follow-up to Assault. If Nintendo would put in the time and money to make Star Fox into a tentpole, for now it looks like Star Fox is going to be stuck behind the in time of crisis break glass box, especially after Zero and Guard proved to not bring in the fans or the dollars. Star Fox has given us some great dodgy and acrobatic flying action, and even the occasional treads on the ground combat that have great rails, planets, and bosses to shoot throughout a nice campaign, but it hasn't been that way since like 2005. We can get there again, back to the fun of the R-Wing and the terror of what lies in space unknown to shoot at, like the Aperoids, but only if Nintendo commits, and right now they couldn't be less interested. Star Fox isn't a household name because Nintendo lets it languish. And after seeing what Team Star Fox is capable of when they're all together, that's insanely depressing for a company that has ideas in the barrel and refuses to go look into it. Get us back into the Lilat system, Nintendo. It's the time when the Switch is actually riding high.